It's great to welcome to the program today Jason Goldwater, who's a California attorney who represents small and medium-sized businesses throughout Southern California, advises businesses on employment and labor issues and best practices. Jason, great to have you on today.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
So let's start with in figuring out, every day we hear this number of billions of dollars is going out. Everybody's getting $1,200. Unemployment's being boosted by $600. The Paycheck Protection Plan, billions and billions and billions of dollars are going out. Let's start talking through what's been announced and what has happened. So the $1,200 were close to 2 out of the 3 weeks that they said it would take for that money to start going out. Is there any system yet for people who did not get direct deposit of their tax returns last year to say, here's how you get me my money? Are any of these infrastructures in place at this point?
So they are not. The IRS has said that they are going to create a portal on their website where people can essentially go on and say, I want my money going to this bank account or going to this address. So that has not happened yet, even though the private sector could probably do this in under a day. The IRS, I'd be very surprised if they managed to do it by next week. And don't forget, it's not just people who didn't receive direct deposit, but maybe people whose bank account information has changed, whose addresses have changed. So none of that infrastructure is in place. And like I said, I'd be very surprised if that happens by next week. I think probably 1 to 2 months is more likely.
So 2 weeks ago, they said in 3 weeks, the people who have the same direct deposit information as when they filed their tax returns would start getting their $1,200. The people who need to, as you say, provide banking information, might have had a change of address, et cetera, it could be 3 more weeks. That sounds like you're saying it's all a little bit optimistic right now.
Well, right. I mean, unless the IRS is going to start blindly sending out $1,200 to bank accounts that just because something was correct on a 2018 tax return doesn't mean that bank account is still in effect. Could be closed. I mean, they could be sending $1,200 really to a bank account that's not open, to someone else's bank account. So I don't see how this is going to happen unless people first have a chance to confirm that the information the IRS has is still correct. From the information the IRS had potentially a year and a half ago.
Okay, so now let's talk about the supplemented, the bolstered, boosted unemployment. The idea was unemployment is, of course, managed at the state level. Massachusetts has its system, Illinois has its system, et cetera. There are different state level benefits that are the maximum benefits available to people. The federal government announced they would be supplementing those benefits with up to $600 per week in additional funding. Now, I know a lot of people who have been who filed for unemployment in the last 3 weeks, as 16 million people did. They, as of now, are not getting anything additional above and beyond what the state provides. What do we know about the rollout of that?
So, as you just mentioned, everything is occurring on a state by state basis. All I can tell you is there's very little information actually about what is happening. We know that there is supposed to be this additional $600. We don't know when it's going to be implemented. As you mentioned, each state has a different system, and on top of that, the CARES Act also provided that people who were self-employed, independent contractors, for example, gig economy workers, would also be eligible for unemployment assistance. Now, typically, if someone is self-employed or an independent contractor, there's typically a voluntary unemployment insurance program that they can pay into to be eligible. So the CARES Act does away with that. But the problem is there is not a single state yet, as far as I'm aware, that has implemented guidance as to how exactly this program will work for people in the gig economy, for example, people who are self-employed, and who is eligible and how they're going to get their money. And right now, the guidance essentially is for people to go ahead and apply, and they'll try to figure it out later. Of course, it is important for people to get applications in because the applications will be processed in the order that they're received, and they will not get the unemployment insurance until essentially for a period before they applied.
So I know some people in the Midwest who, there's a lot of states in the Midwest that have, they don't have very robust unemployment systems. So they are maxing out sometimes at $350 a week. they're counting on that extra 600 that the federal government says is coming, and it's not there, and they're not getting any answers from the state unemployment departments as to when that's going to start.
Yeah, I mean, California, I can tell you, maxes out at $450 per week. So you can just think with our cost of living in San Francisco and Los Angeles and San Diego, 450 a week does not go very far at all. And you're absolutely right that the additional $600 is absolutely critical. But the state employment offices are used to processing a certain number of applications per week. And as you've pointed out, we've had an additional 15, 16 million people applying for unemployment, and the infrastructure is just not there to process those kinds of numbers.
So let's now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
There is one thing I wanted to mention that a lot of people are not aware of. So this varies state by state, but a lot of people who are underemployed right now, who have had their hours cut, may be eligible for unemployment assistance. Again, depending on the state, depending on what their earning level is currently. So it's important for people who are underemployed, who've had their hours cut, to go ahead and apply for unemployment insurance as well.
So then we've got the programs for businesses, and part of this is the payment protection plan. There's a couple of other programs and elements to these programs that are available every
Elements,
day. I'm sorry, what was that?
elements of medical.
Elements of medical, yes, elements of funding. So every day at a press briefing, Mike Pence or Donald Trump will say something like, a million people have applied, or 3,000 lenders are now taking applications, or we have processed $10 billion. Every day it's different, and the terminology being used is different. Are businesses actually getting money yet? Have businesses received any money yet under that program?
So I am not aware personally of any businesses that have received money under the Paycheck Protection Program or the economic injury disaster loan program. So
Right.
that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It just means that the rollout has not been very widespread. There are still some banks like Citibank, which is my bank, that are not even accepting applications. And the money is already going to run out. I mean, Bank of America on its own, I think, as of a few days ago, they processed, I think, over 20% of the total funding available for the PPP program. Meanwhile, Citibank is not even accepting applications. So the whole, again, the rollout here has been, unfortunately, a little bungled.
It's increasingly seeming to me, and I hope that things can get reopened sooner than later, as is safe. Never beyond what is safe, but I hope things get going as soon as safe. It's starting to seem like a lot of these funds may not even get to people before the reopening starts if things continue on this path.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a question of reopening, but by the time we're through with the lockdown, frankly, there will be so much job loss. And unfortunately, the job loss really is not just affecting at this point the hospitality industries or the restaurant industries or economic industries, but it's affecting all the other industries indirectly. I mean, I can tell you as a lawyer, for example, the courts are closed. So any lawyers who are in litigation have no work right now. Even if they did, businesses don't really want to be spending money on lawyers. I mean, this is affecting every segment of society right now.
In the last bit of time we have, is there anything we have not talked about, either in terms of programs or in terms of what individuals can or should be doing, that you think is important for people to know?
So I did want to talk briefly about the programs that are available because there have been some changes to the program since they were initially announced. So the first program that's available is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Grant. So the bill said, and the Small Business Administration initially said that these were going to be $10,000 grants. So the SBA has now changed that. Now it's going to be a $1,000 grant per employee that the business employs up to $10,000. So you can imagine a lot of small businesses may only be getting $1,000 or $2,000, for example. Those loans were supposed to be processed in 3 days. Uh, I don't know of any. I mean, the application has been up probably for a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I don't know anyone who's gotten that.
Yeah.
You can apply directly for that on the SBA website if you Google SBA COVID-19. The second part of that is the Paycheck Protection Plan. So that provides up to 2.5 months of payroll, and it's a loan at 1% now. Initially, it was 0.5%. Now it's 1%, but the loan can be forgiven if 75% or more of the proceeds of the loan are spent on payroll and your payroll does not decrease. And individual banks are the ones processing those applications. And then the third component are just ordinary Small Business Administration loans. They're called 7A loans. And for new loans that are issued, the Small Business Administration has pledged to pay 6 months of principal and interest on those loans.
So
and again,
essentially, you could get a loan that might be a 2-year loan, and in the first 6 months, those payments would be made for you, and you would not need to make that up.
Correct. So theoretically, you could pay the principal back after 6 months minus the principal payments that have already been made on your behalf, and you would not end up owing any money at all.
And of course, this is if you can actually get the money dispersed, which seems to be a question mark around all of these programs right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that the ordinary SBA loans are a little easier to get just because banks make more money on that. The interest rates are substantially higher than the PPP loans. And so banks, although the difference with the 7A loans is that the banks do assume some risk on that, usually from 25 to 50% or so. So banks may be more reluctant and probably will be more reluctant to issue those loans right now.
We will continue keeping an eye on it. And of course, as important as the small business programs, the individual programs, unemployment, and the $1,200 deposits, which we are continuing to try to erase the question marks around, but question marks certainly remain. Jason Goldwater is a California attorney. Jason, thanks so much for talking to us and explaining all of these different elements.
Thank you, David. Best of luck to you.